Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the lunch event by broadbandbreakfast.com. Will broadband succeed in changing the DNA of universities? Broadbandbreakfast.com is a news and events organization. We're based in Washington, D.C., and we have monthly breakfast events called the Broadband Breakfast Club at a local restaurant in downtown D.C. called Clyde's Gallery Place. And this is our first event outside of D.C. NCTA is a major sponsor of the Broadband Breakfast Club. But today, of course, we're having a lunch. And I'd like to thank NCTA for inviting us to present at the cable show.
We have a really dynamic group of speakers who will participate in our interactive discussion. Part of our format is we want to involve the audience in the discussion. So as part of this, we will move to questions by each of you as soon as we can after a lively and interactive discussion about broadband and how it will succeed or not succeed in changing the DNA of universities.
So one of the ways of looking at this is to consider knowledge as something that we have traditionally in the West modeled, not on purpose, on the limitations of paper as its medium. And so we've had a vision of knowledge in the West that views knowledge to a large degree as a type of content that has some characteristics which also mirror those of paper, that it's settled, because once you print something on paper, it's really hard to get the ink back off of it. It's highly filtered because paper is so expensive, and so very few people get to be professors of knowledge. I mean, people who profess to have and to put knowledge forward. And it's been, even though we all know that knowledge is highly connected and that academics and other experts in the world form networks and are social, nevertheless, once the knowledge is published, once it's fully sort of cooked and settled, it has been published in a medium that is hugely disconnected. Books just physically are disconnected from the rest of every other book. At that point, they're floating free in the universe with some footnotes that nobody actually ever follows because it's too hard to go back to the library and chase down the footnote. I mean, some people do, but it's very rare that we do that. So we've had a system of knowledge that assumes that the vehicles of knowledge are stopping points. Effectively, they're stopping points, and so they have to give you everything that you need in order to understand it because it's just too hard to go out. And now all of that is flipped.
We've been involved in online distance learning for about 10 years now, and it's been an incredible learning experience. And our goal was always somewhat, I'll use the word conservative, in that we wanted to be able to offer full degrees online and ensure that we weren't degrading the brand of the university and that we were able to justify the tuition we were charging and be able to justify the degree we were awarding. So our goal, our aspirations were always very high in that regard. And we wanted to be able to create or simulate or develop an environment online that somehow replicated or even improved upon what is offered in the traditional classroom. And so we now have about 14 programs fully online. We have over 3,000 students on a base of about 32,000 at Boston University. These students expect a rigorous, serious degree from a major research university. They expect student services to be provided. They expect to bond with one another and to form relationships with students and faculty that are comparable to what they would have if they were residentially on campus. And they wish to continue their own lives wherever they happen to be.
OpenCourseWare, for those of you who don't know what it is the open sharing of classroom materials from MIT on the web. That's very simple idea. Just take what we use with our own students, put it online. When OpenCourseWare was first proposed 11 years ago, I think the feeling, in part, was we just didn't think it was time for online education. The technologies were too crude, the costs were too high. We didn't think that we could do an MIT quality job offering courses online. And so but we didn't want to get left behind. I mean, MIT is a very let's get it done kind of place, and to take a total backseat while the world around us was changing didn't seem like a very good thing to do. And so what we did is, said, let's just give our materials away and see what happens. And, that wasn't, I mean, a lot of people said that was out of the blue, but the fact is, as we talked about this on campus and thought back about how does academia really work, it's actually consistent because, we train graduate students at MIT who leave the institution and go off to become professors at Michigan, right? Or Harvard or BU. And oftentimes when they do, they would take their notes with them. They would take the course outline that they had TA'd for with them, and they'd use that as the basis for teaching a new course. And so OpenCourseWare was really using the internet to make that, that whole process worldwide, in lightning speed.
In pockets of the world, and I would even say not all of the U.S., we have network connectivity that's capable of doing very high resolution video in real time. And when you think about changing education and you think about changing the university and what that means, I think that is what you're talking about. You're talking about the ability for multiple people to participate in real time with video, with audio, with ancillary materials, and so on. And that's not something that we have uniformly yet. The trends are there. We're on a Moore's law kind of curve for communication, and I have no doubt that that is going to become the standard.
Well, I think that we are reaching in kind of an interesting tipping point, that a lot of things, broadband being one of them, coming together. And as a teacher, I taught my first distance education class on the internet in 1995. And in 1995, my students had 28 modems, and so I had to take what I would normally do in a classroom, and I had to squeeze it and squeeze it and squeeze it and sort of take a lot of my cognitive effort as a teacher to make it small enough to fit through the connection that we had between us. And then the students, of course, had to then take that little tiny approximation of my class, and then they had to re-expand it in their heads to have a real class. And if you think of sort of distance education, even going back hundreds of years, it really is all about this, taking those things we can sort of do together and somehow compressing them. Even if you think of correspondence courses, there's a lot more work to compress a semester of education into a 3-ring binder that you're going to send back and have written assignment. So it's all this sort of cognitive compression and then cognitive re-expansion on the far end. And the tipping point that I'm talking about now is, I mean, and education really didn't drive it. YouTube drove it, Netflix drove it, but pretty much in most United States you can get 1080p video. People watch Netflix all the time, and what's really particularly cool as a faculty member is the kind of technology that I have now in my office. I've got high definition cameras. I can go make videos that are high definition. I can make it so that I can put myself on one side of the screen and my slides on another side of the screen, and I can scribble on it, and then I can cut away to some other thing. And I have a Macintosh computer that sits on my desktop that's got 4 processors and 8 gig RAM and a 500 gig SD. I am like the BBC, basically. I am like my own personal BBC. If you go back 20 years, there was one BBC. Literally now, with some money, but a faculty member can equip themselves to be the BBC, which means that I now have an effect, a pipeline, where I can control every pixel on a laptop at a distance, at a great distance.